People might still be joining. I just want to repeat what I've shared earlier with colleagues. We are going to be recording this session just for documentation purposes. It's an internal session, and this will not be shared externally as a video, but we might extract some of the thinking and then share it around for people to endorse. The idea really of today's clinics is to take what we discussed in the morning at our talk show, but also at the panel with the Vice President for Private Sector and PPP, and take it a little bit deeper into practical discussions of how it relates to our work at ADB. The people that are here who have their cameras on, and a few more who don't, who are going to be having an active role later, are all working on startups, with startups, are researching on startups, and this work has been quite distributed in the organization. If I can have the next slide, please. So I've scribbled up here a little universe of ADB, and some of the folks represented here are doing work, as I said, on startups. We have ADB Ventures that directly has a mandate to work on startups. We have the Innovation Sandbox program that is, contracting to startups and doing innovation challenges. We have my unit, the Digital Technology for Development unit in SDCC, that does policy advisory and knowledge services on this topic. We have the Carrick Secretariat and the CWRD, which is running a TA, looking at startup ecosystems regionally. And then we have the ERCD that is conducting research on the impact of startups on economic development and their specific needs. So I am sure we have possibly missed other people in the bank that are working on this directly or indirectly. There has been a lot of attention given also by our colleagues in the Southeast Asia department, for example, with their program knowledge sharing seeds that has invited many startups to share their experiences. I could go on and on, but there is a lot of action, and Digital X ADB seemed like the right platform to gather all of us for a little bit of a knowledge exchange, and maybe a deep dive into what we could do together and what we could do more. So without further ado, I want to introduce Vishal from CWRD and the Carrick Secretariat, who will be sharing the first of 4 presentations, very short snippets of work that he's involved in. And after we've heard all the presentations, you'll get a choice of breakout rooms, and we can then break up into 4 discussions where you can go a little bit deeper on what each of our presenters has shared, but also feel free to meander into other topics and issues. This is really just a hook to start the conversation, to have someone in the room with a perspective, and each of the breakout sessions will be hosted by colleagues from ADB Ventures and from my team, the DTU and SDCC. So without further ado, over to you, Vishal. Thanks a lot for sharing today.
Great. Thank you so much, Arndt, for this excellent opportunity. I think your team has done a great job with the entire series of events, so much appreciated for the invitation. I'll just be sharing a quick short presentation. Hope you can see a PPT on your screen.
Yes.
Excellent. I'll be leaving it in this mode. Hope Anne, can you just confirm if this is visible? The text.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I think our thinking on our startup related work is that we needed to be collaborative from the start. We cannot think of collaboration across departments or any players in the ecosystem as a supplementary measure, but it has to be built into the program, whatever initiatives they're doing, because it's just too much happening. It's very fast paced. So for one single agency to keep up with all the developments, to find out what the challenges are, it's quite hard. So finding out who is the best resource point to identify challenges, allocation of resources, how do we deal with various harmonization of policies, so on, all these different aspects. It's good to have as much collaboration as possible. So from this discussion, it would be especially beneficial for us if you can share additional points of contact. If your department is actively engaging in some aspect, we would love to hear what that is, and if there are potential ways to collaborate on that. I'd just like to begin with an introduction on the Carrick work on startup ecosystems. Carrick is somewhat new in this area. And previously, Carrick work has mostly been on hard infrastructure, as you all must be aware already. There has been a focus on trade sector and e-commerce promotion, but innovation and ICT promotion across Carrick clusters is somewhat a recent activity, starting with the Carrick 2030 strategy. So this technical assistance project has two specific outputs. The first is designing an operational program for the Carrick Startup Ecosystem Development Hub. This is a virtual hub which will incorporate the entire Carrick region, and we want to identify how, at best, at a regional level, we can encourage ecosystems. Now, one of the questions here is ecosystems are generally run at a national or even at a city level. So one of the questions we immediately encounter is, how do we deal with ecosystems at a regional level? What are those crucial connections that we can make to enable a regional level activity or spurn it further? The TA will run into 2023. So we still have 2 more years of implementation left, and a lot of the startup activity will be over the next 2 years. At this point, we're at a sort of an initial stage where we're finding out what activities or what gaps can be filled by us, and we'll be engaging with pilot projects very soon, actually perhaps starting with November itself. A related output is regarding the Carrick Digital Strategy 2030. This has been developed already. It is at the final draft stage, and it is expected to be endorsed next month. It's pretty related to the startup ecosystem work, because one of the key points of priorities raised by countries was regarding developing innovation ecosystems. So as a digital strategy, we're also looking at various policy harmonization measures that could enable improvements in national level ecosystems that then, national level innovation ecosystems that could then feed into startups and other related activities. And the third output within, as a sub output, is how do we improve ICT operations in the Carrick program? So to begin with the Carrick startup work, we undertook a series of country briefs. We basically engaged with as many startups as possible. So kind of cold emailing most of them and seeing where we got the responses from. And this was primarily done to do a quick mapping of who are the stakeholders in the country level ecosystems, who are interested in engaging with us, and what information do we get from them at the beginning stage. So we had these interviews with perhaps around 20 agencies so far, and we've created the specific country level document to highlight these aspects, and we expect it to be a living document where we keep updating whatever information we get. So just as an example, what we've come up with, for instance, for the Kyrgyz Republic, is we did a quick mapping of who are the public sector stakeholders, identifying in what ways we can engage with them. Similarly, in the private sector, what are the startup success stories out of that country? But most importantly, what are the identified challenges and strengths? These are provided by startups themselves. So these sort of come into our thinking about what gaps are existing in the national level ecosystems, and how which one of those can be can you bring it out at a regional level, and then which ones can be dealt by the Carrick program. So it's kind of a 3-step process that we're looking at. One of the downsides or a gap by doing this is that we only end up speaking with successful startups. So we don't really get a full perspective of the startups that actually never made it out. Like, what are the constraints that they face that really um, many other startups could also be facing, and they couldn't get out of those challenges. So that is one aspect that we would want to explore more. How do we understand what were the causes of failure for startups? Um, and in this study, I think just to identify a couple of highlights in terms of challenges, a common thread across countries was regarding a skills gap. Even though a lot of young graduates are trained, they are still not employable. I think this is a phenomenon across many developing countries, but this was also highlighted across almost all countries in the Carrick region. There's also an outsourcing culture developing to for tasks that can be outsourced easily. So a lot of ecosystem development that should be taking place at the national level is not occurring because of that. There's significant brain drain occurring at both an individual and at a startup level. At the startup level, basically, as soon as a startup is hitting a certain point where they have access to an accelerator outside the Carrick region that is willing to accept them, there's immediate relocation that takes place. And a lot of them are not looking back at the region to expand as a market, as a potential market opportunity. So they have global ambitions, but somehow it is devoid of the Carrick region itself. That was what we heard from many startups. There are a number of silos in the ecosystem. There are no good communication channels for stakeholders within the ecosystem to talk to each other, because of which there are multiple initiatives that are happening, but not a lot of people are aware of the entire picture at once. Then there's a lack of angel investing, VCs and investment funds. Common cause of this is because a high level of financial regulation. And lastly, internet penetration and connectivity varies a lot across the region. As we know, Carrick is from the east to the west. There are so many different points of connectivity that we find that's prevalent. So there is a big issue with how do we make it more inclusive across all members. In terms of strengths, despite all these challenges, there is an entrepreneurship culture which young people are interested in. So there are small seeds that you see sprouting across the region. It's up to new programs to see how we can nurture them. The next is, as I mentioned in the Carrick digital strategy as well, most countries have recognized the importance of innovation ecosystems, and they have specific challenges, specific plans or some sort of programs to promote them. And then we do see a presence of a large regional market, which is untapped because most startups are going abroad and not really looking at domestic markets. And there are many specific country advantages as well. For instance, in Central Asia, Kazakhstan stands out in terms of connectivity. So they do have some built-in advantages at the moment that could be looked at as stepping stones for building further. So on this background, we are thinking about piloting 3 initiatives. These build on the gaps that have been identified. So the first one is a startup ecosystem map. Now, this map is basically, the idea is to build a regional map and a database, which will improve data flow across the stakeholders. So what is happening? So a startup in, say, Kyrgyz Republic is not entirely aware of what is happening in Georgia. A VC in China is not aware of what is happening in Azerbaijan necessarily. So to make a crowdsourced platform where governments also have a stake in this to showcase as best as they can their own startup ecosystem so that they get promoted at a global level. We want to have a mapping mechanism that looks at this. The second that builds on the mapping mechanism is a community activation. So we want to have meetup groups where whatever connections seem to be the most useful, those events take place on an active, regular basis. So for this, we would like to see, at the start, we're thinking of having individual country level meetups, and then to facilitate for the regional level connections, we would have to develop a cohesive group, and then at a later stage, perhaps this would become a regional level community. And the third, because of the skills gap and simultaneous enthusiasm from students, but at the same time, lack of promotion of young people into this startup ecosystem, we want to have a university startup challenge where students can have a project-based learning model, which is basically you learn about a subject or an issue by taking up an active role in promoting the project. So it'll be somewhat like a mix of a hackathon and a real life challenge, and they will be judged based on their ideas and promotion material, and then we'll have a larger challenge that can take place at a regional level after a national level if we see that successful. So these are the three things that we are thinking about. In particular, it would be very helpful for us to know from you if there are any specific agencies that you think we should connect with. If you think, even at the basic level, actually, if you think the gaps have been identified well, and what could we do to further strengthen these pilots? So once we do implement them, we can get all the data that we need to make a judgment on whether we should actually scale it up versus not. So that is it from my end. And I am very eager to hear from you as well after this. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Vishal. And we should hold our thoughts until your breakout. Those people who are not joining Vishal's breakout and have feedback, please note them down and get them to Vishal at a later stage. We thought it would be good for everyone to hear all the presentations, but then the deep dives are separate. So if you have ideas and you're planning to join another group, do get those thoughts to Vishal as well. Thanks, Vishal. That was a very nice picture into a project that's only been running for just a couple months, really. So thanks for that. Okay, I want to go next over to Mark from ITD, who is running the Digital Sandbox program. Mark, you want to share what you're doing with startups through ITD's work?
Sure. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, colleague. This is Mark from the ITD Sandbox program. I'm just going to share a couple of slides to illustrate some of the work that we're doing and specifically around engaging with startups from the digital innovation team side. So just maybe as a refresher, or maybe this will be new for some colleagues, but the Digital Innovation Sandbox is part of the overall ITD digital agenda. And our role is probably not as well known as some of the other colleagues working on what you use in your daily IT life, whether it's your equipment, Office 365, all the applications that run ADB, etc. Our role is really to future-proof the organization from a digital perspective by trying things out on the digital side. So if you see where we are here on this this graph, we are really pushing the boundaries in terms of trying emerging technology or even looking at future technology. We're not looking at what we call Horizon 1, which is the core digitalization. To do this, we use this sort of framework. We need to unpack what we don't know that we don't know, which is basically there's a wealth of possibility in terms of digital coming from a startup out there with new products and services that ADB might not even be aware. And so we're trying to unpack this and see to what extent this can be useful in our own context. So the sandbox approach is really to provide a safe and neutral environment to test things out. So what we're building is completely outside production system, so that if we basically break things, that's fine. Nothing major is being broken. Just in numbers, we've explored more than 200 ideas and solutions with ADB colleagues and startup in the past 2 years since we started, focusing on a number of key technology, artificial intelligence and machine learning, distributed ledger technology, We do a bit of mixed reality. We've had several chatbots launched, and we do a bit of RPA also. For those that found you, this is a robotic process automation. It's basically to stitch together systems that are of different nature. The vast majority of these solutions that have been explored have been with startup because we think that this is very important for us to access more cutting edge technology and service offering. One of the way we do this is through partnerships and hackathons, so outside sort of regular procurement. So many of you here would be familiar with the process of hackathons, which are basically 48 to 72 hours where we bring together great minds so that they would co-design a prototype of a solutions. So people from the ADB who are subject matter expert, IT expert, design expert, and others. And for that, we're tapping different communities of startup, etc., and bring them together. In the recent year plus, even before the COVID-19 crisis started, we pushed this online through what we call online challenges. And some of you may have seen the challenge, the ADB, sorry, Open Innovation Platform, challenges.adb.org, which is a way for us to engage with startup by publishing specific problem statement that can be then addressed by different groups, and typically startup are our target community. We will be announcing tomorrow a new feature on challenges.adb.org that will allow any ADB employees to actually look at the solution that have been submitted there. At this point, we've got about 3,000 startups registered with close to 4,000 solutions in many different operational priority and focus area of ADB, and they're all cataloged there and accessible. We will also be launching a feature on this platform which allow you, ADB employee, to send a link to a startup that you know that may have an interesting solution or product for ADB to register with the startup, so that they provide sort of the minimal detail, contact, and otherwise solution description, etc., so that it's visible to all ADB colleagues. I'll leave it at that, but thanks a lot, Arne, for the opportunity, and colleague, and happy to answer any question later on. Thank you, and back to you, Arne.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark. And we felt that it would be useful not to only think about how we, let's say, design programs for startups or research on startups, but to really think about how the bank works with startups. So that's really your section, and the breakout later with Mark will also include work that ADB has been doing with the technology innovation challenges run out of SDCC that Mark has been a close partner with, and which many of us have been involved with as well. So it's really thinking about how can we procure services or products from startups? How can we directly give them an edge in to our work? Okay, number 3, Amy. Amy is with RCD, and she's been doing research on startups. Over to you.
Thank you, Art, and thank you to the Digital Technology for Development unit for giving us the opportunity to present the research that we are doing at ERCD. Let me try to share my screen. All right, can you see it?
Yes, not in full screen yet, but here it is. Thank you.
All right, all right. So my name is Amy Humble, and together with my colleague, Paul Vandenberg from the ERCD Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department, we are conducting our research on ecosystem for tech startups in selected Asian countries. Let me present to you what we have done so far and what our plans are for the future. We've been conducting research since late 2019, before the pandemic started, and then tried to struggle on through the pandemic, and we've managed to do some have some achievements in that area, and I'm going to present this to you now. Okay, so I'd just like to begin with a little bit of clarification. What we experienced in a lot of countries that we did research on is there's a little bit of confusion on what startups and what SMEs are. And we've had that discussion also within ourselves. And I just like to clarify that we are looking at young enterprises. We've seen that most of them are less than 5 years old, although some of them are older, and they use technology to deliver a product or a service. So that's a difference. SMEs, we've done also research in SMEs. SMEs that go online are not startups. So we've had this confusion. I'd just like to clarify, they use technology in an innovative way, or it should be new to the market. And we've seen a lot of digital apps in this regard. Okay, what we study. We focus on development-oriented sectors. We see, we are very aware that there's like gaming, game tech, fintech, e-commerce, which is much more prevalent in a lot of countries, but we don't focus on that. We focus on the development-oriented startups. These are green tech, or clean tech for the environment, startups that try to solve issues regarding the environment, agri-tech, so for improved agriculture productivity, ed tech for education, and health tech for health. Why do we focus on these sectors? These sectors have a strong development impact, and we are very interested in that. We are interested in the skills requirements of these sectors, human capital. And for us, it's very important also to look at the inclusiveness. So how inclusive is development? How do we share prosperity in terms of when the startups develop and when they offer their services, how can we share that prosperity? And of course, climate and environmental issues. So on the right, you could see 9 circles. These are ovals. These are the different elements of the startups that we actually look at. From government policy, finance is definitely an important factor. We've had that in the panel discussion presented by my colleague this morning. Human capital, and so on. So these 9 areas, but I'd like to say that these are not the only components of the ecosystem. It could be that there are other components that we don't have. This is our working framework. And what we saw in the countries is that some countries have all of them, some countries don't have them, and some countries have some things which are not here in this framework. So we see a wide variation in countries. So we look at the ecosystem, and then we try to look at the constraints that tech startups encounter. Since we are in research, we've published a couple of things, ADBI results as a working paper, also as a book chapter, and we've done a webinar on that. So what do? We analyze the ecosystem, as I said. We hire local researchers. We work with them and go with them to the field and interview. That was pre-COVID. During COVID, we have online interviews. Sometimes 2 cases we've hired firms, and most of the time we've hired local consultants, so individual consultants. We interview the whole range of people that are in the ecosystem, from incubators to accelerators, all the government agencies, venture capitalists, and other investors, as well as startups. We interview for each country around 30 to 40 startups. The countries that we've completed are Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. This was in 2019, before the pandemic. During the pandemic, we managed to complete Indonesia and Singapore. So Indonesia was with a firm. The others are individual consultants. Singapore we studied because of it being a hub for startups that tend to migrate when they obtain or if they want to obtain additional funding. Just what Vishal said earlier, there's a tendency for startups to leave the country and not look back, and they usually go to Singapore or UAE. And so that's one reason we also studied Singapore. We are ongoing with Philippines, waiting for government concurrence. We also did Azerbaijan. We didn't have enough data, so we're doing part 2. We're partnering with the Azerbaijan resident mission, Georgia and Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan in partnership with Vishal's project earlier. So just a couple of photos for what we do. These are personal as well as online interviews. Some of the findings that we have as of now is that we found that a lot of tech startups and SMEs are under the purview of the same laws, which makes it difficult for them to develop. So just let me give you one example. Underneath is a photo of Temu, and he is a founder of BioCure. BioCure is a tech startup that cleans up pollution, oil pollution, so if oil spills and so on, in Georgia. And he said that it's so difficult to get financing for his tech startup. He's based in Georgia because the laws that cover the financing also cover SMEs. So for example, he said, I cannot even get budget for representation budget, which is for going to dinner with potential clients so that they could sell their products, they could talk about it. So the loan or the grant or the funding that they receive does not cover that. So that's what one of his issues and constraints. So there's a overlap of laws. Startups are associated with venture capital, but only 1% of them can actually get it. That's the running average right now. We saw it in Uzbekistan as well as in Georgia. They do use a lot of funding sources, pitching competitions, even loans from banks. And incubators and accelerators are very helpful. This we found out. They are a mixture of private and public, but in all countries we found that they've been very helpful, and a strong legal framework is important. Okay, so perhaps for ADB, this is my final slide. What will be important for ADB for programming purposes? We found that internet is used, but it's not always central. So as mentioned in the panel earlier, while they are developing, the tech startups are developing, for example, prototypes, the internet is always not the central component. So they need to develop the prototype. And until that time, the internet is not really very useful, particularly for clean tech and green tech. What is needed in that time would be patient capital, because they don't have any income or revenues yet coming in. We found that this type, clean tech and green tech, is important for corporate venture capital. So companies that are willing to invest. A second important finding is that cooperation with the government is very crucial. This is for EdTech and health tech, because they carry the data that is very useful, sensitive data. And because of that, it's not fully open to foreign competition, it's regulated. But it could be very important for venture capitalists and banks because of the huge access that you have. You'll have the whole market once you enter into EdTech and health tech, once you overcome the hurdle with governments. And finally, development tech startups have a large potential customer base, particularly in rural areas. So this we see with agri-tech, health tech, and clean tech. There's a huge implication for size and profitability in this area because of its absorption in rural areas. Although in the beginning, the location of where the tech startup will be or its audience, its market, may deter investors. So these are things that we are still thinking of. And perhaps for me, for us, what would be important is how can we cooperate and partner with operations? We are very willing. As I said, the earlier countries that we researched, they are in partnership also with other divisions. We are very open to partnering with other divisions, for example, for other countries, if there is interest within ADB for this. Okay, thank you, Arndt.
Thanks so much, Amy. And just for those of you who have joined us a little bit later and haven't heard the introduction to the session, what we're doing is we're going through some short presentations of colleagues in ADB who have worked on startup ecosystems in different ways. So we had one from an operations department doing a technical assistance project. We heard from Mark, who is in the IT department, who is working with startups and bringing them into our procurement and directly into finding solutions from them for ADB. And now we've heard Amy from ERCD, who does research on startups. Last but not least, we have another presenter from ERCD. There's two different divisions researching on startups, and they will also be together later in the breakout session. And sorry to club you both in the same session, but the idea really is that you are both doing research. You're both following or have a type of engagement with startups that you share. But of course, colleagues will see that there's different accents in your work, and everyone who's interested later to follow in one of these breakout sessions will see, will have the opportunity to ask about both these projects in this third breakout. Without further ado, Jotin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ant, and thank you, the team, for giving us to present these materials from our TA, the KSTA. So this is the TA on the digital entrepreneurship in Asia for economic resilience and post-pandemic recovery, being led by my colleague, the Dong Tom Park, from the macro division. So these are some of the preview of materials that I hope we can discuss further during the breakout. So this the KSTA is running from December 2020 to 2022. So we've been doing it for less than a year. And so there are three key things that we try to achieve. The first is that we want to pull all the updated data. So we will jump into all the data, public data, relevant for the digital entrepreneurship and ecosystem. And we are creating this index, which I'll talk to you briefly, called the Asia Index of Digital Entrepreneurship, IDES. The second would be we try to do the new research on the digital entrepreneurial ecosystems. So we go around and talk to the entrepreneurs in the 6 countries in ASEAN. And we create these surveys, systematic surveys that can be scaled up later. So we talk about that as well. And then the third area is that we will pull all these materials and create a knowledge product. And this will be the upcoming Asian Development Outlook in 2022 in October. Right. So let me talk about this very briefly. Before that, let me mention about our research networks and activities so far. Some of you may have participated in this the Asian Impact webinar a couple of months ago, featuring Professor Ergo Ortio from Imperial College London, Professor Habaradas from De La Salle, Aileen Lim from EdTech Startup in Singapore, and with our own Dominic Mello from the ADB Ventures. We also partner with a group called Entrepreneurship. This is a group that studying what's happening to entrepreneurs in the 5 cities, the Wuhan, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Manila, and London. And we're also conducting survey in close collaboration with the universities in Asia. Right. So these are our partners so far. Right. Okay, so the first product that I mentioned earlier, the Asia Index of Digital Entrepreneurship, IDES. Now, some of you may come across this index constructed by the European Commission, the European Index of Digital Entrepreneurship, right? So we are doing something comparable. We are covering the 21 ADB members and also other countries. So altogether, we have 113 economies. And we create a benchmark index so that later, when we look at, say, here I'm showing you Thailand, where Thailand is standing among the 113 countries in terms of the digital entrepreneurship ecosystem. If you look at the stand-up, the baseline quality of infrastructure, where Thailand stands for the startup and for the scale-up, right? And then, as you see in the middle, we create for each country the data and this type of spider web, so that we know where the countries stand, right? When we discuss, so that we have informed discussion about each country. So we have this, and then as I mentioned earlier, the second part is that we go around and talk to entrepreneurs in Asia, starting with 6 countries: Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. And then we go around and ask them questions, very detailed questions. I think close to 100 questions. And for each country, so we are talking to at least 100 entrepreneurs. We ask them about how digitization affect their business model, whether those digitalization considered innovative, and how the business model change affect the economic performance, and also whether it has an impact on the SDG. Right? And then we also single out some key industries, creative industries, the e-commerce, the fintech, health, among others, right? And this survey is done in corporate, and the questions are systematic, so we can scale up and share with colleagues who want to do the similar surveys. And then lastly, the third key component is that we'll pull all these materials and produce a chapter in our flagship Asian Development Outlook in 2022. That will be coming up in October. So it would be good to have input from ADB colleagues. But the key things that we want to explore is, okay, so we know that entrepreneurship is important for development, right? Take, for example, if you think about entrepreneurs, there are one group of entrepreneurs who are just doing it for survival. In the literature, they call it the subsistent entrepreneurs. But you also have another group of entrepreneurs who are very innovative. These are the productivity drivers. You know where they are, and can we differentiate these two groups when we talking to startups and the entrepreneurs? And then how can we understand the role of ICT, right? The IT, how these help the entrepreneurs to leverage their business model. So we asked a number of questions in this theme chapter, and this is still under preparation, and maybe this is something we can discuss, can get the inputs and contributions from colleagues, which would be great for this theme chapter in the ADO next year. So I think that's it from my end. Look forward to discuss more. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jotin. And I loved how you integrated your image into your slides. I need to learn how to do that. So that was the fourth of our presentations, very short intros to the amazing work that colleagues are doing on startup ecosystems. We are going to break into 4 breakout groups. And can I have the slides, please? Before we go into the breakout rooms. Yeah, it's coming. All right, so here we have our 4 speakers, Vishal, Mark, Amy, and Jotin. Jotin and Amy are going into the Clinic 3 together with Dominic Mellor from ADB Ventures and my colleague Yuni Yong. Then Mark will be going into Clinic 2, which is focused on innovation challenges, working with innovators from startups and bringing them into our work. That's with me and Jason from ADB Ventures. And then Clinic 1 is with Vishal, and that will be focusing on the link to ADB operations and the technical assistance work that he's involved in, how that links back with operations work. And that will be hosted by Sherwin and from ADB Ventures and my colleague SY. Now, because we're not coming back into the plenary, I just want to say that we really were delighted to have so many of you join us today. And if you have ideas, again, that don't relate to the topic of discussion in your breakout room, please pass them on to us and to the speakers. We will all, as a organizing team, reconvene after the event and share with each other what has transpired and make sure that you all who have joined today hear about it. So thanks again for joining. And we've opened the breakout rooms for you to select. Click on breakout rooms at the bottom here, and you'll be able to choose your room. You just have to click on join. So thanks everybody for coming today, and see you in the breakout rooms.
Could someone please assign me to Clinic 1? I don't think I can assign myself into that room.
Yeah, same here. We're waiting. Or
Okay.
maybe
Hold
we're just, yeah. Or are we supposed to stay here?
I think we should be assigned.
I assigned you Vishal to Clinic 1. It should appear on your screen.
Could you just do that again, please? I was just, I think it just disappeared because I clicked somewhere else.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me try again. Vishal, it says you're already in Clinic 1.
I mean, I'm here, so, and I'm not connected with any other device either.
Hold on. Let me try again.
Oh, yeah, got it. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, for some reason, I'm not moving into the other room. Is there another way we could try this?
Okay, hold on. Let me try to move you again. Hold on.
And perhaps you could also just message S5 or Sherwin that the assignment is taking a bit of time.
Yes. Vishal, I'll try to move you to Clinic 2, and then try to transfer back to Clinic 1. Hold on. Let me try that.
Okay.
Anyone else having problems joining particular breakout rooms that we can assist? GM1.
Hi, DG, Shirin.
Hi.
May
How
I
are
ask if
you?
I'm good? Thank you for asking.
No worries, no worries. How are you?
I'm good. Thank
Yeah. Are they all in the breakout session?
Yes. May I ask if you have a particular breakout room that you want to join? I can assign you to that breakout room.
No, it's okay. So they're all in the breakout room. I think it's okay. I
Yes.
will. I guess I will. I thought it was going to be in a forum, but never mind. I will hear from them in a minute.
Yes.
Yep.
Just we'll be on standby for tech support. Just let us know if you want to be assigned in particular room.
So it's. I think it's okay. Yeah. I
Okay.
will then exit from this, and then I'll just hear it from Jose. Then he will just read out to me what happened in this event.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
DG.
you. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Hi, Sabina. Thank you for joining us. Oh.